Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Go ahead and get comfortable. Today, we're taking a nice, slow, and clear journey into the fundamentals of the marketing environment. We're going to break down the massive forces that shape how businesses operate out there in the real world. So let's take our time and really understand this together.
Here's our roadmap for the session. We'll start by defining the marketing environment, then look at the difference between micro and macro environments. After that, we'll dive into demographic and economic forces, followed by natural and technological forces, and then political and cultural forces. Finally, we'll wrap up with a quick review.
All right, let's jump right into section 1. What exactly is the marketing environment? You know, a business doesn't just exist in some empty, isolated bubble. It lives right here on Earth, grounded in the real world and completely surrounded by commerce, society, and nature. We really need to establish this basic idea before we look at the finer details. So, by definition, the marketing environment is made up of the actors and forces that affect a firm's ability to build and maintain successful relationships with customers. Basically, a business doesn't just sell things. Its survival heavily depends on how all these powerful outside forces impact its ability to connect with you, the customer. Moving on to section 2, let's look at the two halves of this environment, micro and macro. We can divide the marketing environment into two main buckets. First, there's the microenvironment. These are the actors that are very close to the company, like suppliers, local competitors, or partners. They directly affect how a company serves its customers. On the flip side, we have the macroenvironment. These are the much larger societal forces that affect absolutely everything in that smaller microenvironment. The key takeaway for us today is that macro forces are massive, and they are considered entirely beyond a company's control. Think of it like a set of rings. Right there in the center is the company itself. The ring immediately surrounding it is that internal microenvironment we just talked about, all those close actors. But on the outside, there's a much larger ring. That's the macro environment, and it surrounds and impacts everything inside of it. For the rest of this explainer, we're going to focus entirely on those big, uncontrollable outside forces. That brings us to section 3, where we'll explore our first two macro forces, demographic and economic. Let's kick things off with the demographic environment. Whenever you think of diverse populations across the globe, you're thinking of demographics, because this force is entirely about human beings. The demographic environment is literally the study of human populations. It looks at data like population size, education levels, location, age, gender, race, occupation, and religion. So why do companies care so much about this? Well, the main point is simple. People make up markets. If a population is getting older, or maybe a lot of folks are moving from the countryside to the city, businesses absolutely have to change what they sell and how they sell it to match those real people. Now, let's shift over to the economic environment. Think about global currencies, busy factories, and financial growth charts. This is all about the flow of money. The economic environment is made up of factors that directly affect consumer purchasing power and spending patterns. We're talking about things like current unemployment rates, exchange rates, inflation, and average wages. Obviously, these factors dictate how much money people actually have to spend. Companies watch these numbers like a hawk because they help predict future spending. For instance, if unemployment is high, people naturally tend to save more money instead of spending it on extra items.
I want to pause right here and make this a bit more personal. How do big economic shifts like inflation or unemployment change your own personal spending and saving habits? Let's take about 3 seconds to just think about that. Right? Think about how a change in your own paycheck or a sudden spike in grocery prices immediately changes what you put in your shopping cart. That is the economic environment in action.
Okay, moving steadily into section 4, natural and technological forces. First up is the natural environment. You often see a pretty stark contrast here in the real world. On one hand, you have pristine, healthy nature with clear water and green trees. But on the other, you have heavy industrial pollution and gray skies. And marketing happens right in the middle of this reality. The natural environment involves the physical resources that are needed as inputs by marketers or that are affected by marketing activities. The big takeaway here is that environmental concerns have grown significantly. Companies are facing major issues, like increased pollution from plastics and chemical disposal. There are also real shortages of raw materials, both renewable resources like forests and unrenewable ones like oil. Because of all this, we're seeing a lot more government intervention. Marketers have to navigate and follow some very strict environmental rules and regulations today.
Next is our fourth macro force, the technological environment. Think about glowing digital screens, global connections, and how data flows right into our daily lives. The technological environment consists of forces that create new technologies, new products, and entirely new market opportunities. Now, it's important to remember this force has both positive and negative effects. Positive effects include life-saving antibiotics, advanced robotics, and the internet. But negative effects can include things like advanced weapons. For marketers, the lesson is clear. They need to understand these rapid technological changes and work super closely with research and development, or R&D, to make sure they're responsibly serving human needs. Let's do another quick checkpoint. Think about a recent piece of technology that you use. How has it created a brand new market opportunity for a business? I'm going to pause again for a few seconds so you can apply this to your own life. Think about it. Smartphones completely change the way we order food, hail a ride, or even watch movies. Technology literally reshapes the entire business landscape. Let's transition into Section 5, where we'll cover our last two macro forces, political and cultural. We'll start with the political and social environment. This environment is all about laws, society, and public voices, often driven by people speaking up to create change. This environment is made up of laws, government agencies, and pressure groups that influence and limit organizations. Sometimes beginners think that laws are just there to hold businesses back, but in reality, systems usually work best when there's some regulation in place, designed to guide commerce and encourage fair, competitive markets. Good public policies are absolutely necessary to achieve a healthy balance between protecting the environment, the consumer, and the business itself. And that brings us to our final macro force, the cultural environment. These are the institutions and forces that affect a society's basic values, perceptions, and behaviors. We all grow up in a society that shapes what we believe, but there's a really critical distinction I want to make here. You have your core beliefs and values, which are passed down from parents to children, and these are highly rigid. Then you have secondary beliefs, which are a bit more open to change. Marketers might have some success shifting those secondary values, but they have almost zero chance of changing a society's deeply held core values. All right, we have reached the end of our explainer. I want to conclude with a quick review question from our source material as a final interactive checkpoint. Without looking at your notes, can you name the 6 company macro environments we just covered? Take a second. Okay, did you get them all? They are demographic, economic, natural, technological, political, and social and cultural. Great job! Grasping these massive, uncontrollable outside forces is absolutely crucial for understanding how any successful business adapts to the world around it. Thank you so much for taking this time to learn with me today, and I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. When you look at the world right now, which of these 6 macro forces do you think will completely disrupt your favorite brand tomorrow?